It could.
It was mine.
It was meant to be his.
He could have even made it even worse.
He really could have.
I mean, only the Bible shows you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's historical facts. It's phenomenal.
It's awesome. It's good stuff. It really is. And I think one of my favorite things in all Old Testament stories, a lot of people don't like to teach and preach out of the Old Testament. Man, there's good things for us to learn from in the Old Testament. Sure, it's not our new covenant scriptures, but man, there are lessons that were taught that have stood the test of time. We're talking tens of thousands of years worth of human history. We're talking, these guys have just always learned from their own mistakes. We have to learn from their mistakes.
And what's amazing is you hear all these Bible accounts, biblical accounts, but you're this day years old when you realize that Jacob, who married Rebecca and went through all that with getting his wife, was the same Jacob who was Esau's brother.
Right. You figure out that this guy went through all of this stuff and did it, but that's what I'm trying to get to, is he did bad things. And he paid dearly for them. But in the end, thank God for his grace. For you and me, but not just us. But look at Jacob and his example in the life that he led. Thank God for God's grace that he saw past that and all of those mistakes and still decided to push the promise of Jesus Christ through him. Thank God for that. Where would we be without Jacob? Where would we be? The deceiver, the bad one, the sinner. Where would we be without David? King David. Was he perfect? Lord, no, he was not perfect. But he is still remembered as the greatest king of Israel. To this day, the nation of Israel carries his star on their flag. That means something. But thank God for his grace. You know what that teaches me? That if it worked for them, it'll work for me. So, we're going to go on chapter 32, verses 22. And just kind of a brief thing. So at the end of all of that, Jacob's preparing for his meeting with Esau. He can't sleep the night before. That's kind of where we're at. He's going to have a very rough night. So that's where we're at now. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives and 2 female servants and his 11 sons and crossed over the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them over the brook and sent over what he had. And Jacob was left there alone. And a man, capital M, a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, when he saw that he, and these are capital he's, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, Jacob, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint, as he, capital H, wrestled with him, Jacob. Who are we talking about? God? I kept saying capital H. I was hoping everybody's picking up on that. Why is God wrestling with Jacob? Huh? Teach him a lesson? What's that? What do you think the lesson God's trying to teach Jacob is in this moment? What did we just say Jacob did? He was hedging his bets, was he not? He prayed for God's help and deliverance. But he said, I'm going to also give all of this cattle and all of this treasure and all of this wealth to my brother. Is that the same thing as wrestling with God? You think Jacob was fully full of faith?
He wouldn't have given everything that he had if he wasn't.
Right.
He would have just trusted God.
And see, there it is.
Did he deceive anybody after that?
After the wrestling match?
After wrestling with God, did he ever deceive anybody else? Because he deceived everybody else in his family.
No, and we're going to talk about why. But first of all, let's talk about why he's wrestling with God. He's wrestling with God physically at this point because before now he was wrestling with God metaphorically. He was saying, God, I trust you, I love you, I know you're my God of my Abraham, you're the God of the promise, but I'm also going to. But is that really what faith is all about? I said before, your works can never achieve what God can achieve for you. If you're going to ask for God's help, you got to put all your faith and all of your trust in His provision, not your own. Jacob is wrestling with God now in a physical form, because of the fact that he didn't show enough faith before this point. So what do you think God took his hip out of location for? And I also want to say this too. This is one of the things I did not notice. Now when God, saw that God, did not prevail against him. Is that even possible? That God could not prevail against a mortal man?
He chose.
Chose. See? We're getting to the meat of it now. Why did God not just wipe him out like that?
He wanted to see
Grace.
His grace. God is showing mercy upon mercy upon grace upon grace. Completely. I mean, look. I want y'all to think about this. We're talking about the creator of the universe. I heard. Sorry. We're talking about the master of all creation in the universe. The whole world sits in the palm of his hand, right? The whole universe can fit in the palm of his hand. He could have, with a thought, ended this battle and turned Jacob into atoms. He could have turned him into poppy flowers, for the Lord's sake. I mean, he could have made him a pile of poop right there in the ground. Just instantaneously. We're talking about the one creature, the one part of creation that is bound not by creation. He could have done anything, but he was trying to teach Jacob a lesson. He's allowing him. It's not that God couldn't prevail against him. It's that he was deciding to wrestle with him to teach him a lesson. And then it says he does what? He touches the socket of his hip and dislocates it. You know, when I say that and I read that and I see it in my head, I see him doing this. Don't you? I just see him touching with the point of his finger Jacob's hip, and that thing is going completely out of socket. That's how I see it in my head. He just goes, you know what? I'm done with this. He hits the stop button. Boom. Now, I'll tell you something else. I didn't realize this until I was studying this lesson, but Jacob suffered with that affliction for the rest of his life.
And it was so profound that the Jews to this day will not eat the socket.
That's right.
That's right. Ain't that crazy? That was a very profound thing for me when I read that. I thought, man, so he never got right after that.
But couldn't it be also like in the New Testament, when he has the thorn in his side, that it would be his grace to bear? Could that be the same thing?
I believe it was. Just like Paul said. Yeah. A constant reminder of what he endured that night with God. And the lesson that it taught him. So let's read a little bit more.
A Sunday school teacher I had one time told me, it was like, when I couldn't grasp the whole concept of the wrestling match between God and him, is imagine if you're an adult and a child wrestles with you, and you're like, okay, you sure you got me? Are you sure you got me? Oh yeah, I got you. And you go, and you let him.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to try it again? That's when I started. Okay, so now I kind of realize, from Jacob's perspective, yeah, he was winning. He didn't win, but God was like, well, he's actually trying really hard. But okay, like you said,
I'm ready. I'm ready for this to stop.
The lesson ends here.
Day's almost coming. I'm gonna have to turn it off. So no, we're going to start up at verse 27. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And then he said, so your name shall no longer be called Jacob. Now this is an important little section. But Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And he said, this is capital H, why is it that you ask about my name? And then he blessed him there. So Jacob, would not let go. He would not release God until he gave him a blessing. Right? That's what he's talking. He's talking to this stranger who he's just been wrestling with for hours upon hours at this point, has now got his hip dislocated, but still won't let him go. And so that's the lesson to take away from this. That was the turning point for Jacob. He was no longer the deceiver, but now he was never letting go of God. He was always going to hold on to the faith and the promise of his forefathers. Do y'all see that? Can you see the change in his person? His very character of his being is being altered in this one event. God said, now I see it in your heart. You're no longer Jacob. You're Israel, my people, the seed of promise. It's a pretty profound section. There was a lot of important things that had just transpired in the course of a single night. And now God has blessed him with a new name. He will now be known as Israel. And does anybody know what the translation of Israel is? No, it is he who struggles with God. Believe it or not. Does that say anything about the Israelite people after this fact?
Yes.
Holy goodness, it does. How many times? Over and over and over across thousands of years to this very day. The Israelite people are not right with God. They struggle with Him, with obeying His word, with following His path and His plan. Wow, how profound a name to give Jacob that very night. What a prophetic name, in fact. He who struggles with God.
Now, can I have a
Yes.
question?
Yes, go ahead.
So, once that happened to Jacob, how does he explain, does it talk about in the Bible how, does he explain his ailment? Because people have asked, what happened to you?
I don't know if he did in this section of Scripture, but I would say because of what these guys just said before, the fact that the Israelite people are, it's such a well-known thing. I'd imagine he came home and told everybody. You know, he probably walked out of that situation with a whole renown or a whole rediscovered faith in his heart. He probably immediately shared it with his wife and kids.
I mean, became part of Hasidic law. So
Yeah,
obviously,
that's what I'm saying. Like he obviously felt that this was an important moment, you know, because he sure enough shared it with his family and his friends. Not to mention the fact that they would have seen it. It's a physical ailment that he carried the rest of his life, you know. So yeah, I would imagine he shared that in great detail with his friends and family.
Confirmation for those who were on the fence.
Yeah,
Say,
this is what happened. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's a fact. Not to mention the fact that his name was now different. Like, he had to tell somebody. You can't call me Jacob no more, buddy. My name's Israel. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody that came up to him for the first month of his life, I guarantee you he was changing his name. Like, yeah, it's Israel now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he just went up and said, I decided to change my name.
Yeah, I've changed my name. But no, he's going to have to tell that story. Like, I wrestled with God for like 8 or 9 hours. He dislocated my hip and changed my name. You know, it was the craziest night. For sure.
God, when any man that's in Christ is a new creature, and God has changed people's names all the way from Abraham on.
That's fact.
Why do we don't change our names when we become Christians?
You could. Did you know that legally you can change your actual name?
Yeah, I knew that.
Like, you can literally change it. You just have to, like, sign a form or something and send it to the state.
Yeah. Well, you have
It's actually pretty simple. I didn't realize it was that simple. I thought you had to have, like, a whole new birth certificate or something, but apparently it's like a form. You fill it out. You're like, hey, I want to be called Duck, and then you're Duck from then on. It's pretty simple. It'll be on your license and everything. Almost done. I'm almost out of time, but I do want to talk about this. Genesis chapter 33, verses 1 through 20. Y'all can read it and kind of more. I'm going to kind of just basically go over it. This is the meetup between Jacob and Esau. So what happens? The very first thing that happens, they come to each other. Jacob immediately approaches Esau and does what? He bows. He bows to the ground 7 times before Esau. Again, false humility? I don't know. Was he being genuine in his newfound faith in God's promise? Or was he just being falsely humble to try to keep his head? He's different for sure. I believe it was truth. I think this time, before, without the animals, without all the other stuff, he knew that even without the gift, he needed to make amends with his brother. And he had to first show true humility. 7 times he bowed to the ground. That's not a happenstance number, is it?
And if he did, at this point, if he didn't have faith that God was going to deliver him, he would have ran.
Exactly. He would have took what? He would have took off.
If he was so afraid of being killed, he would have just run.
That's right. And the Bible tells us that his intent in this was showing true humility, seeking to appease his brother. How did Esau respond? He ran. The Bible tells us that he sprints. He ran as hard as he could to his brother. And what happened? Hugged him, and they wept. Wept on each other for who knows how long. Hours upon hours.
Replay of the prodigal son.
Right. It was a reconnection that was only made possible by the night before. Something had to have happened. Listen, you don't rally 400 of your fighting men to go meet your estranged brother if you don't intend him some harm. Or at least an intimidation factor, would you not? But something happened in the night to Esau's heart that his first response was not war, but love and compassion. That was his response to Jacob, his brother, his estranged for 20 years brother. So while Jacob was struggling with God, God was struggling with Esau at the same time, his twin brother. And so they meet up. Did Esau take all of the herds and flocks and stuff?
No.
He did. But he originally said, no, I will not take this from you. Right. Jacob said, no. You have to. You have to take it. He basically forced it on him. But Jacob didn't want it. Esau didn't want it. Why did Esau not want that? He was already wealthy, for one. But for two, he forgave his brother and he wanted him to be successful as well. He's like, you keep this stuff. I want you to be this great nation that our family has been promised. You have the birthright. I forgive you for it. I want you to be established. What a message and a word of forgiveness, right? In our lives, there are going to be times and places and people that we don't feel like we can stand or forgive. But think about Esau. He had everything taken from him. Everything of importance to those people at that time. And then he worked hard. He built up his own family. He built up his own wealth. So by the time his brother came back into his life, he didn't need anything from him. He didn't need the birthright that meant so much to him in the beginning. But what he did need was his brother, his only living brother. Family, blood is thicker than water. Think about that. Thank you all for your attention. I appreciate